We do not claim, as we stand before you today, that everything that is to be known is known today, and we do not claim that there are not areas that still need to be investigated. There are. We feel, however, that together we have made clear to people what those areas are and what the legitimacy of the inquiry into those areas is. Now, this report tells a graphic story about international crime that has broken all the rules and in the process brought a lot of people to a downfall. Innocent people, people who were both wittingly and unwittingly drawn into the vortex of BCCI. It is a report that issues a clear call for governments to join together more effectively to deal with this question of international financial crime. It is inexcusable that there remain openly operating havens for dirty money that contribute to the destabilization of the entire financial network and that literally aid in the crime that is a scourge in our streets and in our communities. And more than anything, we would like this report to be looked at in the larger, not in the narrower sense. It is a report that condemns certain current financial practices in the international marketplace. It is imperative for law enforcement's ability to work better, that governments, particularly in the G10, begin to consider similar systems and joint efforts that will help create accountability in the extraordinary flow of large sums of money in a totally unaccountable fashion.
The existence of a covert alliance of intelligence services formed in 1976, which ran clandestine operations around Africa, was discovered by Egyptian journalist Mohamed Heikal, who was permitted to review documents confiscated during the Iranian Revolution. The clandestine agency he discovered was called the Safari Club, a covert group which was created on September 1st, 1976, which played a secret role in political intrigues involving many countries, mostly in Africa and the Middle East, while being primarily funded through secret backdoor deals, government banks, and independent operations. One of the primary functions of generating funds to satisfy their secret operations and tasks was through the Pakistani merchant bank, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, or BCCI. Saudi Intelligence Minister Kamal Adham was the Director General of Saudi Arabia's Al-Mukhbarat al-Amma, or the General Intelligence Directorate. Known as a very gregarious man, he also served as a royal counselor to both King Faisal and King Khalid of Saudi Arabia. Just 3.5 years prior, the Bank Credit Commerce International was founded by a Pakistani named Agha Hassan Abidi in 1972. Abidi was an associate of Adham's. Many countries aligned with the Safari Club would have closed-door meetings with the bank's leading managers. In time, the Central Intelligence Agency would also shadow the club, but would not become an official member. Instead, it remained as a close partner of its formal members, one of them being George H.W. Bush, director of the CIA, who would open an account with BCCI under false names and have many dealings with important members with the bank's account holders. In time, BCCI becomes the fastest growing bank in the world, as Time magazine will describe it as not just a bank, but also a global intelligence operation and a mafia-like enforcement squad. Operating primarily out of the bank's offices in Karachi, Pakistan, the 1,500 employee black network has used sophisticated spy equipment and techniques along with bribery, extortion, kidnapping, and even by some accounts, murder. The black network, so named by its own members, stops at almost nothing to further the bank's aims the world over. The club's purpose was therefore to oppose Soviet influence by supporting anti-communists. In John P. Balega's book, American Alliance Policy in the Middle East, 1945 to 1992, he outlined the importance for the formation of the Safari Club. Quote, The Shah provided covert assistance to groups seeking to destabilize the governments of Soviet allies in the region, such as Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as providing assistance to pro-Western governments such as Oman and South Vietnam. In an effort to further advance these goals, the Shah associated Iran with a group of conservative Middle Eastern and African states in an informal organization known as the Safari Club. This club was dedicated to blocking the spread of Soviet influence in the Third World. End quote. Later, in an interview, Prince Turki Al Faisal, head of the Saudi intelligence from 1977 to 2001, said, quote, in 1976, after the Watergate matters took place here, your intelligence community was literally tied up by Congress. It could not do anything. It could not send spies. It could not write reports, and it could not pay money. In order to compensate for that, a group of countries got together in the hope of fighting communism and established what was called the Safari Club. The Safari Club included France, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, and Iran. As the Safari Club was beginning operations, former CIA Director Richard Helms and agent Theodore Shackley were under scrutiny from Congress and feared that new covert operations would be quickly exposed. Author and historian Peter Dale Scott had classified the Safari Club as part of a second CIA, an extension of the organization's reach maintained by an autonomous group of key agents. Thus, even as Carter's new CIA director, Stansfield Turner, attempted to limit the scope of the agency operations, Shackley, his deputy, Thomas Clines, and agent Edward Wilson secretly maintained their connection with the Safari Club and BCCI. The Safari Club, which was formed through covert means, was signed by 5 of each country's dignitaries. Alexander de Marchands of France's External Intelligence Agency, Kamal Adhan, Saudi Arabia's General Intelligence Directorate, Kamal Hassan Ali, Egyptian Director of Intelligence, Ahmed Dalimi, Moroccan Director of Intelligence and Commander of the Moroccan Army, and General Nematollah Nassiri of Iran's Sabak. They would all sign to the charter, kept in a locked safe under the watchful eyes of Alexander de Marchands. The goal was pretty straightforward: to stop the impending force of communism from the Soviet Union by affiliating and financially supporting the anti-communists. Here, the old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, would come into play for certain countries of the Safari Club. Although the United States itself was not a member, the CIA, led by William Colby, the director, was involved through backdoor deals, continued by its next director and even more fiercely loyal to the apparatus, George H.W. Bush. Back in 1977. The name of the Safari Club was, of course, de Marchand's idea after his trip with notable associates to a resort in Kenya in 1976, where they first met with Alham, Ali, and Nassiri. Its headquarters would be based in Cairo, Egypt. The club would begin opening accounts made through CIA Director Bush in 1977, using BCCI Bank as its main conduit to funnel large sums of money to the tunes of tens of millions to Saudi arms deal Adnan Khashoggi, who was also close friends with Kamal Adham. Adham was also appointed by Saudi King Faisal to head the GID, as well as beginning to have closer affairs with Egypt and its State Security Investigation Service intelligence arm. On April 27, 1978, Nur Muhammad Taraki and the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, otherwise known as the Khalq faction, supported by the Marxist supporters in the Soviet Union, seized total power in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, Afghanistan President Sardar Mohammad Dawood is overthrown and murdered in a coup led by pro-communist rebels. While the country implements better education and a more secular point of view, mass executions take place, including many of the conservative religious leaders, and political oppression unprecedented in Afghan's history, igniting a revolt by Mujahideen rebels. Following a general uprising in April 1979, Taraki was deposed by Khalq rival faction Hafizullah Amin in September. Amin, along with the Afghan communists, were even more brutal than the Sunni farmers and Afghan population had dared dreamed of. Their tactics were capricious in its apathy, which even shocked their Soviet handlers in the communist homeland of the Soviet Union. By December, Amin's government had lost control of much of the country, prompting the Soviet Union to invade Afghanistan, execute Amin, and install Parcham leader Babrak Karmal as president. U.S. President Jimmy Carter was surprised to hear from his White House advisors that the Soviets had invaded Afghanistan. It was seen as a complete power move for global domination from the Soviet Union and wrest away the power structure of the United States in the Middle East. As soon as the smoke cleared after the invasion, Carter was determined to respond rigorously to what he considered a dangerous provocation. In a televised speech, he announced sanctions on the Soviet Union and promised renewal aid to Pakistan and committed the U.S. to the Persian Gulf's defense. Other countries began to follow suit. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher enthusiastically backed Carter's tough stance, although British intelligence believed the CIA was being too alarmist about the Soviet threat to Pakistan. By early 1980, Carter initiated a program to arm the Mujahideen through the Pakistan ISI and secured a pledge from Saudi Arabia to match U.S. funding for this purpose. U.S. support for Mujahideen accelerated under Carter's successor, Ronald Reagan. The CIA began covertly assisting the Afghan rebels by providing them with arms and funding through numerous factions led by Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, leader of the Hizb al-Islami, Abdul Rasul Sayyaf, leader of the Islamic Union for the Liberation of Afghanistan, and Ahmed Shah Massoud, leader of the Jamaat-e-Islami. The main Afghan Services Office, or the Maktab al-Khidmat, was led by three people who helped assist Islamic and Afghan fighters from around the world to inject the cause of jihad. They were Abdullah Azzam, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and Osama bin Laden. This office would also benefit from funding from the CIA and Saudi elites in the kingdom. The Pakistan ISI, CIA, and British MI6 would begin funneling hundreds of millions as military-grade weaponry to the Mujahideen, which some of that funding even saw its way to the hands of known Afghans like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, Abdul Rasul Sayyaf, and even to the Maktab al-Khidmat in its main office in Peshawar, Pakistan. Although according to Ayman al-Zawahiri, none of that money from the CIA saw its way to Osama bin Laden directly. He, who refused any American funding as he had his own assets from his father's construction company, the Saudi bin Laden Group, to help build roads and have construction equipment brought in from the country of Saudi Arabia. Stinger missiles approved by U.S. President Reagan and assisted by CIA Director George H.W. Bush through Operation Cyclone had helped turn the tide of the war to the benefit of the Mujahideen, and it was the CIA who was the primary benefactor. The CIA had also begun funneling money to the Mujahideen recruitment offices of the Maktab al-Khidmat inside the United States in major cities like Arizona, Chicago, Oklahoma, New York, and New Jersey. With the Iranian Revolution in full tilt, the Safari Club ceased operations, but would continue to exist under more covert means. By this time, William Casey was now the director of the CIA and began solidifying the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. They both would use the Soviet-Afghan War as the means to an end, to finally eliminate the communist bloc from expanding any further, but the final result would have a more far-reaching and dangerous adversary in Islamic extremism, which also be supported by the Saudi kingdom as a means to divert attention away from being itself a victim of said terrorism. Hundreds of millions would find its way to madrasas throughout Southeast Asia and even inside the United States, with the CIA either looking the other way or being completely ignorant of said funding. In a 2002 speech at Georgetown University, Prince Turki of the Saudi Arabian Intelligence Service described the situation, that it was Watergate matters who took place here, and the intelligence committee, which was literally handcuffed by Congress, which allowed the Safari Club to exist. The Safari Club used an informal division of labor in conducting its global operations, Saudi Arabia providing money, France providing high-end technology, and Egypt and Morocco supplied weapons and troops. The Saudi Club, the Safari Club, typically coordinated with American and even Israeli intelligence agencies. The group helped to mediate talks between Egypt and Israel, leading to Sadat's visit to Jerusalem in 1977, under the Camp David Accords, and even the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty in 1979. This process began with Moroccan member of the Safari Club personally transporting a letter from Yitzhak Rabin to Sadat, and even reportedly warning him of a Libyan assassination plot. This message was followed by secret talks in Morocco, supervised by King Hassan II and with the Israeli general Moshe Dayan of the Mossad and Yitzhak Hof and Egyptian intelligence agent Hassan Turhami. Immediately after CIA Director Stansfield Turner told an Israeli delegation that the CIA would no longer provide special favors to Israel, it was Shackley, who remained active in the Safari Club, who contacted the Mossad and presented himself as their CIA contact behind Turner's back. The funds, which would help build and recruit Sunni extremists from all over the world and even made their way in the states outlined above, where the backlash wouldn't be felt until the 1990s. Near the end of the Soviet-Afghan War, BCCI Bank had now access to $4 billion held in 145 branches in 46 countries, with hidden accounts and money laundering from some of the world's most nefarious individuals, including Osama bin Laden, Muammar Gaddafi, Abu Nidal, and even the Medellin cartel, according to a Time report by Richard Lacoya in 2001, when BCCI Bank had been brought under the light by British investigation codenamed Sandstrom. The CIA, along with the National Security Agency, had many accounts in the now suspect bank. Quote, Alan Fires, head of the CIA Central America Task Force from 1984 to 1986, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of lying to Congress about when high-ranking intelligence officials first learned of the illegal diversion of funds to the Contras. Fires said he became aware of the diversions and informed Claire George, then the CIA's deputy director for operations, in the summer of '86. But Fires said George ordered him to deny any knowledge of the transfers when he testified before the House Intelligence Committee that October. In exchange for being allowed to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanors instead of more serious felonies, Fires is now assisting Walsh's investigation. With the help, Walsh will probably seek a perjury indictment of George and perhaps other present and former government officials, end quote. By 1989, the Soviets retreated under the mediation of Pakistan held by General Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq. With a full withdrawal plan, the U.S. affinity with the war ended suddenly to the surprise of even other world agencies. It left the Mujahideen without any plan for a future in Afghanistan, as many of them returned back to the countries of origin, and left Afghanistan in a state of dismay and turmoil as 2 civil wars took place, killing far more in just 9 years than 10 years of war with the Soviets. This would anger some of the Sunni affiliates and their radical Islamists against the United States, and this would come back to haunt the U.S. in the years to come. Meanwhile, the Iran-Contra scandal, which saw itself come under full swing with the Reagan administration feigning full ignorance on the matter, but not from Pentagon officials and even some within the State Department who had taken the fall for siphoning funds from under then General Oliver North, who had been tasked to supervise the funds, which was supposed to make its way in Iran in hopes of releasing the American hostages. But some of the funding went to the Contras in Nicaragua in their conflict with the anti-Sandinistas against the socialist regime. However, Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger had taken down handwritten notes ensuring the full notice and compliance from U.S. President Reagan, who had feigned innocence on the matter, was well aware of the transfer of funds and even weapons to the moderate elements within Iran. By 1991, BCCI Bank had been forced to close worldwide. The spectacle of the Iran-Contra affair had damaged the State Department, the Arab nationalist states replaced by the Wahhabi ideology, and the rise of the ultra-orthodoxy, within the CIA returning to full swing by its former director Bush by regrouping the Safari Club underground. The beginning of a more volatile world was beginning to take place, this time in the form of international Islamic terrorism, which had begun back in 1979 with the seizure of the Grand Mosque in Saudi Arabia, the Egyptian Islamists assassinating Anwar Sadat, the Iranian Revolution under Ayatollah Khomeini, and of course, the CIA's assistance externally and internally of many of the Islamic charities and recruitment offices inside the United States. A war was beginning to take place around the world, and more notably inside the United States. The Frankenstein monster would soon rise, with the doctor being the Central Intelligence Agency.